Well, welcome everybody. This is Kelly Fonner, and thank you for attending today's webinar titled ABCs for AAC. And it isn't about going through alphabetically what AAC is all about. It really is about using alphabet books, ABC books. I'm to tell you here that today's call is being recorded. Yeah, I'm not a tricky one for naming titles of sessions. I usually name things exactly what they are. We're going to talk today about using alphabet books to encourage language learning for your children and your students who use AAC systems, whether they're low-tech or high-tech systems. So we're going to talk about different properties of those alphabet books and how they can encourage language learning. We're going to talk about adapting alphabet books. We're going to talk about how you can do data collection because, of course, we're always being put up for doing data collection. I need to do some disclosures. I don't have any financial disclosures for that other than the webinar itself. Some of the products that you're going to see in here, I am a certified presenter, but it's not just about those products. So on we go to learn a little bit about you all. So if you would please so kindly, I'll tell you a little bit about myself while you're filling in a little bit about yourself here in the first poll that we've got. My background is as a teacher. Before I got started as a teacher, a special education teacher, I was a parapro in early childhood programs in the Philadelphia area. And I see some of my buds from Pennsylvania there, and other people that I've met along my many travels. I worked in Pennsylvania for about 10 years, and I traveled to Wisconsin, where I am now, that I cannot believe that I'm getting ready to celebrate my 20th year in Wisconsin. In those years of being a teacher, I worked in early childhood settings. I was a transitional kindergarten teacher. I worked in high school resource. In all of those settings, I had kids that had complex communication needs. I also am a family member of someone that used a communication system. My husband's oldest sister has cerebral palsy and for much of her life used backup systems for people that didn't understand her natural speaking voice. For the rest of my career, after I left being a direct service provider teacher, was as an assistive technology specialist. So I traveled to schools in the 5-county area around Pennsylvania, and then I worked for a statewide system in Pennsylvania that's now called PATAN. And then I travel and work as an independent assistive technology consultant and trainer. So for the years that I've been in Wisconsin, I worked at UW-Milwaukee on some grant projects as a graduate student, and I worked for different companies doing training, and I worked on a contract basis with school districts. So I was just telling Deb, who sets up the webinars, that in the last month I've been in 20 different schools, 3 different states, doing training on not just AAC systems, but also on writing tools and on various literacy things. So it looks like everybody's filled out we got a couple more people still filling out the poll here. Let's see where we're at. We have about 8 more responses here. So part of the reason that I do the alphabet, the ABC training here, is my love of alphabet books and what it can bring to a wide variety of people. All right, I think we're going to close the poll, and I'm going to do a countdown here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's see who's all joining us here. So we have a lot of people and sometimes we wear double hats as assistive technology specialists. We have people who are family members, and I recognize some of you. Hello, gang. A lot of people SLP hats wearing here, teachers, and then people we have. One of the things here in the polls, we can only add a couple. We don't have as many slots as we possibly can. But welcome, everybody, and we'll try and represent all of you in the many hats that you all wear. I started to mention that one of the reasons that I like doing this ABC presentation, or how it got put together to start with, is I am a collector of alphabet books. These are all of mine. Yes, it's a bit of an obsession. A little bit of everywhere I go, and people have started giving me alphabet books as well. Oh no, I shouldn't mention that to some of the people on this list. But anyway, so you'll see as we go through the presentation, I've done some pairing of all of these books will be reappearing on the slides. If you've downloaded the handouts, you'll see them paired up for different reasons around different purposes of language building, of social purposes of using communication systems, of morphology purposes of communication systems, of vocabulary building purposes, and some of it is about the alphabet. So we're going to go, I've got a couple different videos in here. In the handouts, on the pages that have the videos, you'll also see video links so that you can go and find the videos on YouTube or various places where I found these videos or where I have those videos stored. This first video comes out of the Iowa Department of Education, where they have a project on building the literacy skills of children using a variety of communication systems. And this first little boy is using a pod book, a pragmatically organized dynamic display in the low-tech version of pod. And he's sitting with his teacher on the floor with an alphabet book. She's not making any demands upon him, but simply following him as what he wants to talk about in the alphabet book.
What do you want to tell me? Okay, put it up here so we can both see it. I need to go back. Okay, you want to tell me something? Okay. Want to tell me something? Okay, what do you want to tell me? Something about, is it about alphabet? All right, so what page do we go to? Okay, let's find 22. There it is, right there. There they are. Okay, what did you want to tell me about it? Do you want to go to caps like this? Okay. All the way. Are all of these letters on the page? What do you want to tell me? Okay, put it up here so we can both see it. I need to go back. Okay, you want to tell me something? Okay. Want to tell me something? What do you want to tell me? Something about, is it about alphabet? All right, so what page do we go to? Okay, let's find 22. these letters on the page? You're seeing the same? Yep. These are big letters or capital letters. Like this right here, capital letters. Right? And these are the, what are those called? Little letters. That's right. Okay. That's good. Okay.
So you see that she's just following his lead. You know, he's talking about the size of the letters. She's asking him questions. He will then start to name letters. Again, she's not demanding that. She's just following along. And that's what we want to do a lot of times, is just follow what children are talking about in the books. I love how she, is following along with his natural voice, reinforcing what he's saying with the voice in his communication book, and going along with that. So let's just listen a little bit more.
Kelly, can you turn your speakers off on your computer?
You want me to turn them off now? Okay.
Yeah, because it's playing over the video.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure if they were, because I wasn't hearing it on mine. All right. We will do that. Get everybody getting double sound there doesn't always make it great. So one of the things, too, is that what we know is that children have the ability, vocal mechanism-wise, to develop some sounds and some speech, that's something that will come, again, if they have that ability. And alphabet books are something that, kids, if they love those and if they want to point to them and if they want to point to the letters and if they want to say them, let them go along with that. Don't make it a demand. There are all different kinds of books. And one of the things that's nice with ABC books is that you can find a range of books that are, cartoonish, but books that are also photographs. You can find books that are museum quality books that, adults look at, so that we don't have to keep everything baby, kindergarten-ish, but books that can be historical in nature, books that go through different issues, books that relate to children's preferences and their desires. And so, again, we're going to be matching these up, not that you have to match them up specifically with your type of tool. I've listed just a couple of tools because we're limited by the poll product, that we can only have 10 things here on the poll. But just to give me a little bit of an idea of what type of AAC system you all are using, it'll give me an idea of what kind of robust vocabulary system or a closed vocabulary system that people here on the webinar today are using. When we look at the kinds of communication that you can promote with alphabet books, we can look at things that are social in nature. We can look at things that are turn-taking in nature. We can look at things that are more about language building. We can look at all of those kinds of communication competencies. We can look at operation and control, because by nature, the alphabet, if we go in alphabetical order, I can be looking at teaching a student or my child their operational control of their system, of how to put things into their message display, how to operate the message display and then clear it. So we can be moving along within the system that way. If they have an alphabet that they like, and it's a book that we look and we read repetitively, because we know that many children like to read the same book over and over again, so we get that repetition piece in, we can start to work on other types of skills. Once that they might be looking at reading the book the first way through, we might be looking at words and different types of words, building on putting sentences together rather than just saying one word, building on 2-word phrases, building on 3 words. So those kinds of things can be really helpful in building skills over time with the same book. So let's take a look here at what kinds of tools people are using. So we have people that are using some of the GoTalk-based systems. They might be the hardware-based systems. They might be the app-based systems with some of the in-app purchase products that give you a little bit more robust vocabulary. You're going to see both of those here in some of the screens. We will about half of the people that have also responded that they're using Picture Exchange, where we're teaching the process of communication, remembering that text is not a thing, it's not a symbol, it is the process of exchanging communication. So learning that process. We have people that are using some of the systems like you just saw with this little boy using Pod, whether it's the printed pod and also the electronic pod. We have people that are using the Prencuromic-based systems like Accents or maybe LAMP it might be, or you'll see represented here. We have people that might be using a systemware system like ProLocal2Go, Satilis-based systems like the chats and some of those products. Speak for Yourself, another robust communication system. There's a world of products that are in that Tobii Dynavox response system. Like I said, it would have been nice to be able to break some of these product lines out a little bit more, but we would have been doing poll pages for like the next 5 screens. Touch Chat and the variety of vocabularies that are available within those, such as Word Power and some of the other organizational systems that are within Touch Chat. And then, of course, all of the other kinds of systems that, we just didn't have the opportunity. But, I think you're going to see, as I move forward here, a wide variety of systems and how they can be used. So even if your particular product isn't named here, I'm hoping you'll see that it's the type of system and what you can do with it and how it's used. So for example here in vocabulary where you have core words and then fringe vocabulary, the idea of using picture books. And you can do things like, a lot of kids like to name and a lot of kids like to label, but it's more than just labeling items. But you do need to have a system that's got a wide range of fringe vocabulary when you use picture books, because you can't just have core vocabulary, although you can describe things with core. So you can do your commenting on items like I see, so you could do your I see, but then you want to get into some of the specifics, so you've got to have more than your I'm looking, I see, or I saw, if you want to describe something that you saw somewhere else. So you can do those things with core vocabulary plus fringe systems. When you're looking at adapting books, so the books themselves, from Carol Zangari's website, Practical AAC, and we could have you do a raise of hands. So over where you see your name in the list, you can do a hand raise by clicking on your name. How many of you are familiar with the Practical AAC website. There I see Dory's got her hand raised. That this is a really wonderful website. There you go. Boy, we've got a lot of people that know this website. And you can sign up to get the daily notice from what's going on, whether it's on Wednesdays we get the video and you get another thing on another day, but you get really good hints. Yes, great. Thanks, people. And this is one of the things that was on the Adapting Books. You can always just go to the website and look up past things. And so the ideas of, before you go to adapt a book, ask yourself these questions. What purpose is the adaptation going to serve? Is it going to give you access to the words in the book? Is it about language growth? Is it about building fluency? And so these are the things that I thought about as I was looking at the ABC books. What is it about that the kid's going to benefit from that adaptation? Is it because of the diversity that the learner themselves? Is it because they needed to see the words better? Is it because I needed to make adaptations for them to hear it? Is it because I needed to make adaptations for them to be able to turn the pages? And, of course, the other driving factor, is the book good at all? I mean, there's alphabet books out there that, like, I look at them and I put them down right away, because they're not interesting. They're not engaging throughout the book. So you have to really have a driving factor. Not every ABC book is worth what it is that you're picking it up for. Some books, they're engaging because they are interactive. They're an alphabet book that you've got somebody that is still a very haptic learner. They need to touch stuff. They need to pull things apart a little bit. They need to open things up. And they need to learn the difference between my communication device is something that I talk with, and the book. So especially if you have a low-tech system, the book isn't what I'm pulling apart and doing that with, or the iPad isn't the thing that I pull apart. I might want to do that with the book. So I explore, and I'm looking at the pictures and turning through and looking at those, and I talk with my communication system. And so I have that purpose for telling you I like it, I don't like it, I want to say that again, I want to see more pages, and then I turn to my book to do some other things with. And so often people will put a communication system down in front of a kid, and there's no purpose to be communicating other than just the communication, whether it's an app or a low-tech system. People think that that's going to drive the communication. You have to have something to talk about. And so an alphabet book that's interactive, that can keep somebody busy, now I can talk about that book, what I'm seeing, what I'm playing with. If I need help manipulating something that's in the book, then I can ask for help with it. I can take turns with doing stuff in the book. But just an AAC system by itself, that's not the point of the conversation. And I don't think that it's always understand to have a conversation with a child where it's just you, the child, and the device. That's very abstract, to just have some conversation without the point of the conversation. We talk about this communication triangle where it's you, the communication partner, and the child who's talking. And then you have a topic. You've got to have a topic. So you, the child, the topic, and then the thing that helps you converse. They need to understand, well, the person understands me through this device, but what's the topic? And so in this case, we're talking about alphabet books being the topic. Sometimes, again, some kids need to have something to do. So you can be having a coloring book that's an ABC book. You can be describing things. You can be talking about the colors. You can be doing a craft project as a part of your coloring book. So I've found all kinds of ABC books. Here we are, fishing. I'll never understand ice fishing. I live here in central, in Wisconsin, where people go ice fishing. Why you cut a hole and the only thing that's holding you up is beyond me. But, it's things to talk about. And so you could be doing this with low-tech systems. You could be doing this with, a simple core board and adding on words as you go through it. But, having, core boards and activity pages for reading so that we can go through and have your alphabet along with your core board. So you have those things that you add to it as you move through the activity. Like I said, you could do it with all different kinds of systems. This is a really nice website, this uniteforliteracy.com. That's an online website for books. They have both English and Spanish. It looks like they're building for other languages. The books are narrated. There's only a few alphabet books, ABC books, but they're nice. They have photographs. Not all of the books are photographs. Some of them are cartoon pictures. But you can do a search there at Unite for Literacy, different topics. You can build a favorites list of their books. It certainly is not the resource as another online resource that we're going to talk about later, but you certainly can, find some books here. And even with a chat page, like this first page in the pod book, or a core page, you can be talking about what's going on the pages with that. And then add an alphabet page to it. If you want to start getting more detailed and with older children, the books with, from Graham, with the alphabet books, and with all of the images. And this book from Puzzle Island is really wonderful because you solve, you have a letter that's written at the very beginning of the book. You follow through. And one of the nice things, too, is you don't have to always go from beginning to end. Put a bookmark in it and come back to it later. I mean, too often people think that you've got to finish a book in a session, or you have to finish a book within, this portion of your reading block, or whatever time that you've got in the library time. But you can, some kids, 10 minutes is enough. And use a bookmark that they've designed at another time and come back to it later. Just read 2 pages at a time and prime their interest in it. So when you have a rich vocabulary system, it isn't always about just saying the letter and naming the items, but let's describe things. Let's go through and talk about what you see. In this case, we're solving the problem of the letters of words that we're capturing the words that are there to solve a later problem. So there's other things that we're discussing and we're guessing, and we're making predictions. And so there are other things that are going on and that we're talking about, and we can talk about present tense and past tense and future tense as you're going through it. And, and again, I'm trying to give you examples across product lines. It doesn't mean that you have to talk about this book with this product. It's just trying to give you some sampling with it. The other thing is how do you, if you're going to do a lesson, how do you kind of prime the pump? And this group is really creative with their older learners in how they get started. I'll do a little pause here. So this is from the Dreamweavers. You'll find them on YouTube in a couple different videos. So as they get ready for their literacy lessons, and you'll see a variety of PRC and Toby Dynavox systems, you'll also see, as they'll close in here on some of the learners, on some of the cheat sheets, or what Caroline Musselwhite refers to as smart cards, that they use for sequencing. So as their students are learning some of the 2-hit and 3-hit sequences to the vocabulary that they say, but this is something that they start out every literacy lesson with, so that they are bringing up their core vocabulary and some fringe words. And then you'll also see there on the table some of their words of the week and some of the other things that they're using and they're going to be working on. When we look at older students, we can also look at, this is actually one of the alphabet books that I had in my high school resource room. So some of the books that encourage creativity, so that this is the Z was Zapped. And it's an alphabet book that follows along with kind of the theatrics. It shows each of the alphabet letters on a stage, and the A was in an avalanche. The K was kidnapped. So each letter has an action that it's doing that starts with that letter. The Z was zapped. Those kinds of things, and it has that performance of that letter. And then students, what I've seen some people do in their classrooms is rewrite this book, so that you have these extension activities that you can do. And then also, you're looking at what are some of the vocabulary systems that are out there that are more mature. So this is from the GoTalk Now series, and one of the add-in vocabularies for Talk All Day, which is from Yvonne Gillette. So that she's looked at what are some of the vocabularies needed. And this is actually available also as a resource in printed displays to put into the GoTalk 20 and the GoTalk 32, and has for reading and reading in the library and other things that are book-related resources in like I can't remember, I think there's something like 30 printed displays, and then you record them into your GoTalk 20 or GoTalk 32. But this, of course, is in-app purchase, and so you just move between the vocabulary sets within that resource. But thinking about our older students, and the ABC books that are appropriate for them, like we saw with Puzzle Island. This one's a little bit less involved as far as what's going on each page. If you need something that's more less detailed on the pages and less words per sentence to follow along with. So that brings us up to this idea of what adaptations. Again, another thing from Carol Zangari on the Adaptive Books with AAC Learners article that was done, is that think about what you might need to do to simplify or revise the text. Think about what you're doing in adding AAC symbols to text. This has been a very hot item recently, in the last couple of years, that we want to be careful with how we're using AAC symbols on the text. We're not talking about rewriting the text with symbols because we don't want to draw away the learning of reading. We're talking about adding AAC symbols somewhere on the page so that students have those symbols to communicate about the text, especially if those symbols are of fringe words that are in the book that a child doesn't have available within their AAC system. So if I have a low-tech system or even a high-tech system that doesn't have a particular character's name or some way that I can describe that character, then you might want to add an image of that on the textbook somewhere or on one of those add-on pages that you can do. So Augmentative Resources, the company that has those Velcro-sensitive pages they have that you can add onto books, or like a stretchy page that you can add onto a book. And then you can add extra symbols onto that very easily, very removable. So it adds extra vocabulary for you to use in addition to, the core that you might be using or to the robust vocabulary that you might already have. It just doesn't have particular words from the book that you're using. You might also want to think about changing the format. Sometimes we might cut a book apart, so take the binding completely off and reassemble that book to make it easier for somebody to turn. I've taken books apart, laminated each page in a 5 or a 10 mil laminate just to make it easier for a child to turn the pages themselves. We look at around making an electronic copy, making sure that you're following the copyright laws and making things an electronic copy so that a kid can electronically turn those pages. Things like using page fluffers, where you put a popsicle stick or sponges in between the pages so somebody can get their hand in between each of the pages, or putting those pages into page protectors so that they can turn the pages. You'll see, people have done presentations on these. There are examples on the internet of ways of making books more easily accessible to students. And then also by adding interactive elements, things that, the big item on the page becomes 3D, those kinds of things. And Carol, in the article on adapted books, gives you some other examples there. And so I just refer you back to practicalaac.org to take a look at that. Here's the other big electronic sites, and if you want to do a raise of hands of how many people are using Tar Heel Reader. Okay, this is your exercise for lunchtime here. But how many people know of this site? I really should ask you probably the other way around. But Tar Heel Reader has been around now, I'm sure we're over the 15-year mark, but a really growing resource of books of all different venues. But so some of the things for you Tar Heel readers and for the people that don't know Tar Heel Reader, you should be checking this out. And it's something to go and take a look at. I've done a shortcut here for Tar Heel Reader. The long resources to go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and go and get their link right off of their website. But we've done a shortcut for you related to here. But once you're at the website, it's free to look through. If you do a workshop with people that teach you how to make the books, they can give you the resource to get into it, or if you send me an email, I can give you the password to write your own books on it, or find somebody that's already got that and they can pass on the password to you. I'm not allowed to do that over this webinar. But at the Tar Heel Reader site, one of the things that you can do, as you see circled here, is you can do a search. And alphabet is one of the search characteristics of the books, because there are thousands of books at this site. So you want to find a way to search them. And once you find searching, so you can search by alphabet, and then if you find books that you like, you can then like them and create your own book list that you go back to. So you'll see here in an alphabet book, sometimes you can find alphabet books that are around certain letters, and then you can also find books that are certain themes. So you'll have this theme of superheroes or whatever it might be. So you can find young childish kinds of alphabet books, and you can also find sports-related alphabet books. I will warn you that you might want to look at the rating scale, rating for everybody, because there have been a series of books that have been written for the beloved character of Elmo. However, for those of you that are old-time Saturday Night Live fans, if you remember the Mr. Bob character and all the things that they used to do to him, like, oh no, and he was like crashed onto windshields and put into the dryer. Now, those kinds of things do happen to Elmo. So if you do the rated for everybody, you won't run into the nasty things that happen to Elmo. They were done for older students that would think that that is funny to happen to Elmo. But your little kids will not think that that is funny when you go and find those books. Also up on the University of North Carolina website, I've given this to you as one of the handouts, is an open-ended ABC book for you to create your own alphabet book in PowerPoint. So they've done nice resources there, and that leads us to this make your own alphabet books. There's so many tools that you can make your own alphabet books with. And I am a big user of what you already have. So if you have, BoardMaker Online or BoardMaker Studio, or if you're a LessonPix user or a Visual user or any of these kind of online products, you can create your own alphabet books with these. Print them out, use them online. That can be a really great thing. If you're an app user, Pictello, AbleNet Sounding Board, you've got, Clicker. Clicker Books is a really great way of making alphabet books, so that you have your alphabet, you take a picture, or take a picture with the iPad, and the kids really get into this, and they love reading the things that they have written. And if you're working on certain categories of words or new words, new vocabulary, you can really put an emphasis on those kinds of words. So, it becomes a great project. I've seen people make alphabet books with cookie dough letters that they bake, so it becomes a cooking project, and just really nice things. Let's talk about some other ways of communicating. So working on, the idea of predicting or moving ahead and taking turns, and doing that with some of the low-tech systems that are out there. Inclusive device or any of these devices that have sequence mode, step-by-steps, those kinds of products, where you have books that do this little prediction, where here in the alphabet's tail, you have the letter, and then the next coming letter, you see the tail of the animal. And so with the Smooth Talker, in conversational mode, you have the student that uses one switch that can say, the letter M, and the next kid can say, though it's coming with the letter M. So you have this kind of two-switch modality with it. so you can do that kind of part-to-part reading. And I always remind people that if you are using step-by-steps or sequencers or smooth talkers, don't just give them the plain, switch. Put something like book routine. We're trying to teach kids symbolism. So put a symbol. You'll hear Scott Marfilius and I talk in our workshops and say, no naked switches. They need to have a symbol on that switch if you're going that switch route. If you're doing things with the idea of core vocabulary and activities, the themed-based alphabet books work really nicely with core words and activity-based systems. So like Sonoflex is one of those systems that works nicely that way. So if you've got any of those activity alphabet books, so you have your core vocabulary, and then how, whether you're talking about the reading display, or you can have, pointing and I don't have, so you have a reading display, you can have a display that's on transportation, going back to the arts and crafts book, you have those. So you just kind of, find the theme and then find along with that. Back to the Graham books, Animalia. We have so many kids that love animals, and so, here's an example with Touch Chat, with one of the vocabularies in Touch Chat, with word power. And word power is in a variety of products, not just in Touch Chat, but you've got the ability to, move back and forth from your core vocabulary to also having your alphabet words, your core words, so that you can then go into finding the category, having your alphabet, using your core vocabulary, so you can be using your pronouns, your beginning verbs, and getting into creating phrases and sentences and really working with it as you move through it. And tongue twisters are so much fun to be looking at and describing. And you don't even really have to be, using the words that are there, although these can be very powerful words to be working on the tongue twisters that they give you. There's so much to describe in the pictures themselves in any of the Graham-based alphabet books. And so just looking and talking, here's a wonderful video from Jane Farrell. Again, I got linked to this off of one of the video days from Practical AAC, but you can also find this at Jane Farrell's website.
We're going to read this book, Kim. Okay. We're going to have a look at the pictures. We're going to listen and look. My squeak, we speak. The cats purr. Lions roar. They don't roar. Lions roar. Owls hoot. Bears snore. Yeah, more to say. Let's pretend. Let's pretend. Animals. Oh, zoo animals. What? Let's pretend to be a bear. Here we go. Oh. Okay, go back to page 1. Here we go. Oops. Crickets creak. Mice squeak. Oh, you want to show me something? Okay. You want to show me? Oh, I am looking. I'm looking, yeah. Oh, I'm not looking in your bag. I'm looking.
And I just love how Jane is so animated in whatever that she does. If you go to janefarrell.com, her website, she's got lots of great literacy videos around all of the, and she's one that uses a variety of communication systems. So you see her here with some of her pod using students. You'll also see some of her students who use ProLocal to Go and some other communication systems, and just how she builds literacy into all of the different things that she does with her students on her caseload and at the various schools that she works at in Australia. And it's just that idea that promoting literacy, promoting alphabet use, you might actually be using books like these. So this is from an alphabet series in one of the kindergarten classrooms that I was in, where they had a book around all of the letters. And so, each letter, it was whatever letter we were doing that week or that day, and they had pages where you had to find the different words, and so we were circling things, and it had different things. But on the back of the book, it was also had different activities to do at home, so that once the kids finished the book at school and they took it at home, there were other things for suggestions to do with that book at home. And one of the little girls that I was there consulting with was using one of the in-app extensions in GoTalk Now, which was Patty King DeBond's AAC to Go. And it's got core vocabulary, but it also has within it the alphabet. And so what we did is we had a core board, a printed core board, and we were using the alphabet as in her electronic system, so that people would start getting familiar with how she could be using the alphabet to talk about the alphabet pages, talk about the alphabet and navigate the alphabet pages within her vocabulary system, so that she could use it during their writing activities and other things that kids were talking about alphabet and throughout the school day and throughout the school week, because they just weren't sure how she could be saying the letters in other activities. So we were using a combination of systems. I wish I should have had a bigger picture here where you could see the core board that was off to the left here at her desk. And then her page here as we went through and got to the alphabet pages within her AAC to Go portion of her GoTalk Now app. So that worked out very nicely in her kindergarten classroom. And, if you're looking for kind of extension activities, I've added this handout into the set of handouts for this session. You can also go to the University of North Carolina's website and get this handout from Gretchen Hanser on the different kinds of activities that help support teaching the alphabet. So not just reading alphabet books, but talking about the letters while you're doing writing. We're going to talk about that here. Using environmental print. We already talked about making alphabet books, naming things, doing chanting activities, doing tongue twisters, all these different kinds of good activities that support learning the alphabet book. And of course, what are the ways that we do data collection? I do a lot with video of students and collecting video samples of those students and their communication growth throughout similar activities, trying to do video of those students in the similar activities at least once a month. We look at, what are we looking for? Their use of certain words. Are we looking at their syntax? Are we looking at their social use of communication? Other ways in which we track students is through people's use. Sometimes we'll use the communication matrix, and in how they are using communication by giving information and social in obtaining and refusal and those big categories. But of course, the communication matrix only goes up to 24 months expressively. Some people will do samples and will capture communication functions through the pragmatic profile. If their AAC system or the app has the language activity monitor built in, they'll turn on communication sampling during certain activities to capture those and use that those reports out of there. You might look at the different kinds of modes that kids use in social settings by using social networks, and what kind of communication modality do they use with different people. People might also look at prompting and the kind of modeling first, and then what kinds of prompting that people might need in different situations. So there's different ways that you'll see that you might use data collection. You'll see some of those data collection processes through the Communication Enhancement Process, or ECT, or other videos that I've got here on the AbleNet University. Just to give you, we've got about 15 more minutes here, just some other examples of using alphabet books in more descriptive ways and more building language ways. When you've got more robust vocabularies, or you've got that idea of core words, and then I can have just topics that are built off of core vocabularies, and access to the alphabet. So when you have systems that have all three, so things like a VAS, I can be looking at alphabet books where I'm building those ideas of talking about characters, talking about the place, talking about the settings or the emotions that are happening in that storybook. You'll see nice books here like Aaron and Gayla talking about alphabet books, and so they introduce themselves, what they're doing. So you've got a little bit of those things that you could talk about more than just a different item on each page. You might have the books that are about locations. So you'll have different books about states. You have different books about states and cities and places that people have gone. So again, when you've got a more robust vocabulary system, you can talk about locations and intermix them with the alphabet. So again, if you have something that's got more of an alphabet that you can go to and from, and then you can comment on what you see. You've got more of a story to talk about. So these are things that can be done during library time. These are things that you can be sitting with your child at home. Again, you can stop at places. You don't have to go the whole way through this book. Use a page marker and mark the page where you were and come back and talk more about this later. What parts of the book did you like? It doesn't have to be that I've got to go from A to Z in one sitting. We'll use certain letters and go through it, the story for a little bit, take a break, and come back to it on another night. The idea of being in a library, there are many things that you can do communication-wise in a library. We come in, we turn back our library books, we check out new books, we can peruse a book, we talk to the librarian, and this is a video that just shows you all those different components of what can go on in a library.
Where are we going to sit? Let's go sit down. Here's your book. Hi. Do you see Bryce? This. Are we going to read? Are you going to read, or are you finished?
So again, from choosing the book, looking through it, pounding it out, turning books in, going and talking to the librarian.
Like a stamp? Okay. Are you ready? Would you like 1 or 2? 2. Would you like red or white? Red. Because they're the
There are many different things that can happen in part of a library piece. This is a little girl that talks in many modalities. You know, she has a communication system, she has sign language, she has words. She also has a printed pod book system that she talks with. So she's got a variety of communication systems that she uses. For some people that are unfamiliar, when you have support staff that come and go and they're not quite sure how to talk with kids with communication systems, sometimes a little script that can help them out. We've given you an example of that. Not that they have to always follow along, but it gives them an idea of what kids can say, how to do some modeling, what are some natural cues, you know, so that you're not doing too much interfering. And not that kids always have to say everything that's in a script. We don't want to have everything that they absolutely say, but sometimes people that are brand new to AAC have no idea how to interact with children, and they go into this demand mode. Say this, or they go into a quiz mode. Say this, say this, say this. And sometimes we give them an idea of what's the most natural thing to do? What's the least invasive thing to do? How do you model for a kid? And so we give them some ideas of what to do and what are some of the things to say. You know, how can you, for things that AAC is not a naturally occurring thing in the world of a child that's fully included. And so we give them sometimes a script to follow and follow along. And then once people feel settled in, we fade scripts out. They're not something that they follow along with all the time, but can be something that get people who are, the adults that are unsure of themselves, something to get started with. I mentioned that sometimes there are historical ABC books. I mean, honestly, I found an alphabet book almost everywhere I've gone. But again, when you get into these historical books, you need to have something that's a little bit more rich. So you have to have something where you go beyond core vocabulary. You need to have things that you can comment. You need to have some fringe words. You need to be able to describe, and you need the alphabet because you've got to go to and from those words. Again, some ideas about alphabet books where the alphabet book might be very plain, where this is a pop-up book that was more of a designer alphabet book that somebody gave me. But it was really cool because we could go through it, and we were always fascinated by how the letters popped up and what color the letters were in. And we could describe it, and what did we think was coming next. So we could do some prediction, who was going to turn the page. And then we started talking about what would be a sentence or what would be a phrase that would go along with that letter. I'm watching the question list, and I'm not seeing anything coming up. So, we're starting to come along the end of our time. So if you do have any questions, I'll just chatter along until I see something pop up. Again, museums have wonderfully beautiful pictures so that you don't have to, be as concerned about being in an alphabet book with a older child. Describing it is more about what you're doing. and the language that you're building as you move through it. But again, the idea is not just doing the letters, but what you're talking about, what you're describing, and what is your focus of what you're talking about. I've also have found some alphabet books that are specific to different disability groups, which has been very interesting. And this one that comes from the Asperger's Association talks, each letter of the alphabet talks about a different attribute for children. And it becomes another jumping point off of different discussions. And actually it was my cousin who has a son with Asperger's who introduced me to this book when he was very young. And he just graduated from high school last year. And she talked about how this was important, and it was something that when he was a little boy and they were just talking about it, and how he was, actually this one, how he had a very busy brain. And I thought about how this was, gave you good words that you could talk about and got into descriptive words. Because sometimes we talk a lot about core vocabulary, but getting into adjectives and describing words is really an important stage for children with their augmentative communication systems. We do a lot of nouns. We can't just talk in nouns. And of course, if you know me, I love writing. Writing is very concrete for kids. And getting them into literacy for many children, the gateway is writing, because it is something that connects letters and sounds to reading. And we should not, all of these things here from David Copenhaver, you shouldn't put off writing until children knows their letters and sounds. That many kids get the idea of putting letters to paper, letters to technology, gets them into the idea of sounds. Especially for children who struggle with making their own sounds. If they have technology, they can produce sounds through technology. If they can produce sounds through their AAC system, or they can touch a letter on their printed board and you make the sound for them. When we talk to adults that have AAC systems and they talk to them about how did they learn to read, they will often describe to you that they hear their mother's voice in their head, or they hear their teacher's voice in their head when they read and when they've done phonics. That's the sound. You know, they hear their dad's sound in their head that made those sounds as they were learning to read. And what we do know from research is that the more kids write, the better readers they are. So don't ignore writing. Get to those alphabet pages. You know, the systems like Grid that put an emphasis on different arrangements of alphabet. Find the right alphabet for your kid and make sure it's connected to their low-tech or their high-tech system. And if it's not, add it in. Find it. Demand it from our manufacturers that there's an emphasis on writing and the emphasis on alphabet being in their system. You know, make sure that you've got a way to move between writing and communicating. You know, that we've got this link between it, because talking is not the same thing as writing. There is a link, but there are differences. So we have to make sure that kids start to see little words. So they start to make things that join up their nouns and their verbs into things that are sentences. And it really starts to bring all of communication together for them. So I have a video here of one of the little girls. This is from a couple of years ago. But you'll see this example of her. I had visited her classroom and other children had been writing and they weren't sure how she could write with her communication book. And as soon as we gave her access to it, actually, we didn't know at first that she was using the letters, but as soon as we pointed it out to her, she was choosing letters in lots of different ways, by clapping, by touching.
Back at the back. Look back here. We're just going to look.
So she's not one that can consistently point.
Those are all.
But when you introduce the groups,
they're all back here. All of them are back here.
she might clap. And again, kids need to, according to Dr. Gretchen Hanser, we need to give them access to alternative pencils. So whatever the pencil might be for their future, we need to give them access without limits, whether it's 5 minutes a day, so that they can start to, and then whatever letter they pick, you write it down. Now here I'm giving her an example, but she truly had already chosen.
Look at that. And she's going to write it on the board. Oh, a Y.
So she's landing on things.
Should we pick some other letters?
And you'll see some other nice examples. I've done a short URL for you here.
We could end it.
To boast some of the research that Gretchen has done and some of the alternative pencils that she's written up here. And again, that'll also be in your handout for you. So I'm hoping that we've given you some ideas. If you've gotten any questions, please write them in here. I'll try and answer them in the couple minutes that we have remaining for you. But as I said, I just have this great love for what alphabet books can do for us and all the different ways that we try and promote literacy, but also all the different ways that we try and promote language learning with our children. And I thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you have questions that you think of afterwards, you've got my email here. So you can contact me through my website as well. And I really thank AbleNet for hosting the questions here. And you're very welcome, people. And again, please follow up if you have anything that you think of. And thanks again for AbleNet University for hosting these series. It's really helpful for those of us that don't always get a chance to attend other things.